I'm Jeff Jarvis. I wrote a book called What Would Google Do?
Yes.
And I won't ask you. Since doing that, a notion clarified in my mind that I want to just try out on you is that what we're going through right now is much more than a recession or a financial crisis, that it is a fundamental restructuring of the economy and society, going past the industrial age of mass production, distribution, marketing, media, into something based on knowledge and abundance and the things that I did right that you're about. And when we see what's happening to automotive and banking and newspapers and other parts of media, soon probably advertising, big swaths of retail, real estate, we're seeing a huge and fundamental restructuring that I don't think is going to go back. And that a lot of new companies, one hopes like yours, are going to start creating new versions of these industries. Am I going too far?
I think so. I'd like, of course, that you're good at it, because your book was about taking some ideas and really talking about them in a global context, and very successful, I might add. I think the evidence right now is that while I'd like what you said to be true, it's not today yet true. I'd like us to make it true. And the reason is that almost all of the money and almost all the people and almost all the capital is not going to where you described it. It's going into traditional businesses and traditional industrial and service operations. I think one of the ideas about the Aspen Ideas Festival is to talk about new ideas like the one you proposed, is how could you accelerate that transition? What happens is that you get a young entrepreneur like in the kind of industries that are difficult to transform. And when you talk to them, they've hit so many regulatory barriers, so many barriers to entry, so many other ways that we need to find ways to make it easier. So when as a young engineer, I was very interested in trying to make the internet more successful, and I ran into the regulatory structure of the telcos. So for example, there was something called a T1 line, and what happened is everyone figured out how to build a business beneath the regulatory pricing for a 1.5 megabit T1 line. So an artifact of regulation was that a whole business was created. Had the regulation not been there, we would have been 5 years farther along. And I think if you look at every one of these businesses, you'll discover that the incumbents, typically large companies, working with regulators, have ended up making a cozy structure for themselves. And when the truly discontinuous idea comes along, it's not in anyone's interest to take it on. And that's why the market pressure is so fundamental. So getting back to our earlier conversation about the government and its role, governments are not particularly good at dealing with change. Right? One executive told me that high tech works 3 times faster than traditional business, and government works 3 times slower than traditional business. Right, so that may be in his extreme case. We designed our government not to change very quickly, and yet we are asking for very rapid change. It has to occur from the private sector, it has to occur from enlightened leadership, and it has to occur in areas where money is being made.
So could Google only be Google because you were doing something new?
I would argue that Google is as successful as it is primarily because of the openness of the internet. That had you had brilliant founders such as Larry and Sergey, in a difficult, regulated industry, the progress would have been much, much slower. And people always give us so much credit, but let's give credit to the people who foresaw the internet, opened it up, designed it in a way that it did not have significant choke points, made it be possible for random people, including 24-year-olds in a dorm, right, to sort of enter and create something new. That's a story of innovation that's very, very precious, and we need to make sure that we preserve it for the next competitor, by the way, of Google.
Let me just zero in for a second on that question. Do you not then believe that this economy has been, through the past 2 years and the changes we've seen, fundamentally reset, that we're just going to proceed from here apace?
Well, I would like it to be true. My question to you is, where's the data? When I look at most of where the money went in the economy, when I look at the tradition, all the politics and all the bills and so forth, and I've supported much of this, most of it's going to the incumbents. Now, with a counterexample that we doubled our National Science Foundation funding from $3 billion to $6 billion, which is a drop in the bucket. There's more money for appropriate medical research and those kinds of things. But fundamentally, if you look at it mathematically, the majority of the power and control is still not around real innovation, and that needs to change.